They thought I was too old to notice, too tired, too broken. Lying in a hospital bed with wires in my chest and a machine counting every beat of my heart. They thought a man like that could not fight back. They were wrong. My name is Walter Hensley. I am 72 years old, and this is the story of how my own son tried to sell the house I built with my hands while I was in the intensive care unit fighting to stay alive. But before you hate him, let me tell you who I was, because my son forgot one thing about his father, and that one thing cost him everything. For 40 years, I was a county surveyor. That means I measured land. I walked the fields and the tree lines and the riverbanks, and I drew the maps that told people where one man's property ended and another man's began. I know deeds. I know titles. I know the quiet paper underneath every piece of dirt in this county. Remember that. It matters later. My wife Ellen and I built our house on 4 acres outside a small town in the hills. We built it slow, a room a year when we could afford it. I poured the front steps myself. Ellen planted roses along the fence, yellow ones, her favorite. We raised our son Bradley in that house, taught him to fish in the creek out back. Every summer, the two of us down at the water before the sun came up. Then, Ellen got sick. And 3 winters ago, she passed. The house got very quiet after that. But it was still ours, still hers. Her roses still came up every spring, whether I remembered to tend them or not. I lived there alone. Coffee on the porch in the morning. The fence line at dusk. It was enough. Bradley grew up and moved to the city. I will not pretend I did not miss him. But he had his own life, and I told myself that was the way of things. A son leaves, a father lets him. What I did not know was that my son was drowning. Bad investments, credit cards, a business that failed and took a lot of borrowed money down with it. He owed people. The kind of people who do not wait politely. He never told me. Not once. If he had, I would have helped him. That is the part that still aches. He never had to steal from me. He only had to ask. But shame does ugly things to a man, and debt makes him do worse. Then, this past spring, my heart gave out. I remember the porch. I remember the coffee cup falling. I remember the pain, like a fist closing behind my ribs, and then the ambulance and the lights, and a doctor's voice saying words like emergency, surgery, and critical. I went into the intensive care unit on a Tuesday. I would not come home for 19 days. And somewhere in those 19 days, while I lay there with a tube in my throat, my son decided he could not wait for his father to die. Here is what Bradley did. He knew I kept my important papers in a lockbox in the study. He had a key. I gave it to him years ago for emergencies, because that is what you do with a son. You trust him. He took an old copy of the deed, the one with my name on it from before the trust was created. It looked official enough to fool a desperate man in a hurry. Then he found a man in the city who forged documents for people in trouble. Together, they made it look like I had signed my house over to a buyer, a cash sale, fast and quiet, the kind that closes before anyone asks too many questions. Bradley forged my signature on the sale papers. He forged a power of attorney saying he could act for me while I was, as the paper put it, incapacitated. Then he tried to sell my house, Ellen's house, our house, the one I built a room at a time. He agreed to sell it for far less than it was worth because he needed the money now, not next month. The buyer placed the money in escrow, waiting on one final release document. Bradley had already promised that money to the men he owed. And he arranged for me to be moved, when I recovered, into a shared room at a care facility on the edge of town, a bed by a window. That was to be the rest of my life. I found out from the nurse. Her name was Rosa. She worked the night shift in the intensive care unit. She was the one who held my hand when the fear got bad at 3 in the morning. She was the one who talked to me about her grandchildren, so I would have something to think about besides the beeping. One night, when I was strong enough to sit up, she came in looking troubled. She said a man had been calling the hospital, asking how long until Mr. Hensley would be discharged, asking whether he would be well enough to sign papers, asking whether there was any chance he would not recover at all. She said the man had given his name, Bradley Hensley, my son. She looked at me very carefully, and she said, "Sir, I do not want to frighten you, but that is not the voice of a man who is worried about his father." I said nothing. I just watched the ceiling, and I remembered. Because a father knows his son. And in that moment, lying in that bed, I understood exactly what was being done to me while I was too weak to stop it. I want you to understand something. I was not angry, not the way you would think. There was hurt, yes, a deep, cold hurt that a coffee cup and a hospital blanket cannot warm. But underneath the hurt, something else was waking up. For the first time in a long time, I was not sad. I was clear. I asked Rosa for a favor. I asked her to bring me my phone from the drawer and to let me make one call when the doctors were not around. There was a man I needed to speak to, a man I had known for 30 years. His name was Daniel Voss. He was my attorney, and more than that, he was my friend. I called Daniel from that hospital bed in a voice barely above a whisper, and I told him everything Rosa had told me. There was a long silence on the line. Then Daniel said, "Walter, do they know?" I said, "Know what?" He said, "Do they know about the trust?" And I closed my eyes, because they did not. My son had forgotten the one thing that would undo him completely. Let me tell you about the trust. Back in 2009, when Ellen and I started thinking seriously about the future, we sat down with Daniel and we did something careful. We put the house into an irrevocable trust. An irrevocable trust is a hard thing to explain, so I will keep it simple. It means the house did not belong to me as a person anymore. It belonged to the trust. Ellen and I kept the right to live there for the rest of our lives, but neither of us could sell it alone. The rules of that trust said the house could never be sold without the signature of the trustee. The trustee was not me. The trustee was Daniel Voss. Do you understand what that means? It means that no matter whose signature was forged, no matter what papers Bradley faked, no matter what he told that buyer in the city, the sale could not stand. It was air. He had tried to sell something that was not his and never could be. You cannot sell a house held in a trust you do not control. Not with an old deed, not with a forged signature, not with a fake power of attorney. My son, in his panic, had committed forgery, fraud, and elder financial abuse, and he had done it to steal a house that could not be stolen. Daniel said, "Walter, I can stop this in an afternoon, but I want you to think. What do you want to happen to Bradley?" I said, "Give me a few days. I want to do this right." Here is where I made a choice. I could have had Daniel call the police that night. I could have had my son arrested in his apartment in the city before the week was out. But I did not want him arrested in the dark, in a rush, on my word alone. I wanted the truth to stand up in the light. I wanted it undeniable. I wanted him to sign enough of it himself in front of witnesses, believing right up to the last second that he had gotten away with it. So Daniel and I set a trap, a quiet one. The buyer in the city, it turned out, was nervous. When Daniel contacted him and explained that the property was held in an irrevocable trust and the sale could not legally close, the man panicked. He did not want to be part of a fraud. He agreed to cooperate completely. So we let Bradley believe the sale was still moving forward. We let him believe there was one last paper to sign to release the funds, a final closing document. We invited him to Daniel's office to sign it, and we waited. They discharged me on a Thursday. I did not go to a shared room in a care facility by the window. I went home, to my house, with Ellen's roses coming up yellow along the fence, exactly where she planted them. I sat on my own porch, and I drank my own coffee, and I let my strength come back, one day at a time. And that following Monday, I put on my good coat, and I went to Daniel's office. But I did not go in. Not at first. I sat in the small room next door, where I could hear everything through the open door. Bradley arrived at 10 o'clock. He was cheerful, relieved. I could hear it in his voice, the voice of a man who thinks his troubles are finally over. Daniel greeted him kindly, slid a document across the desk, said, "Just your signature here, and we can release everything." And my son, without reading a single word, signed his name twice. The document Bradley signed was not a closing statement. It was a sworn statement of facts. It laid out in plain language that he had used an old deed, signed his father's name, produced a power of attorney, and attempted to complete the sale of a property he had no legal right to sell. He had just signed enough of the truth to make denial useless, in front of Daniel, a notary, and a court reporter, all while believing it was his payday. Daniel let him sit for a moment. Then he said, "Bradley, do you know what you just signed?" And I walked in. I will never forget my son's face. The color left it. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. He looked at me like a boy who had been caught 40 years too late. I said, "Hello, son." He said, "Dad, I can explain." I said, "I know you can. You always could. That was never the problem." The problem, I told him, was that he thought I was already gone, that a man in a hospital bed was a man who could no longer see. He forgot who taught him to fish. He forgot what his father did for 40 years. He forgot that I know land and deeds and every quiet piece of paper underneath every acre in this county, including the one under his feet. The sale was stopped that same afternoon. Truthfully, it had never really existed at all. The buyer got his escrow money back and was grateful to be out of it. The forged paperwork was pulled apart piece by piece. The man in the city who made the false documents was reported through Daniel's office. He had bigger troubles than mine coming for him. And my son, my Bradley. Daniel looked at me and asked the question one last time. "Walter," he said, "the statement is signed, the evidence is clear.
The police can have it in an hour.
This is forgery and elder financial abuse. He could go to prison. Do you want that?" Bradley was crying now. Not the pretty kind of crying. The kind that shakes a grown man apart. I thought about Ellen. I thought about a small boy at the creek before sunrise, holding a fishing rod too big for his hands, laughing. And I made my choice. I did not send my son to prison. I told Daniel to hold the statement, not destroy it, hold it, because trust, once broken, has to be rebuilt with more than tears. I told Bradley the truth, that the debts he was so ashamed of, the debts that drove him to this, I could have helped him with all along, that he never had to steal from me, he only ever had to ask. I said I would help him now, not with a gift, with a plan, a hard road, paid back slowly so he would remember every dollar, and on one condition, that he never again decided in secret that his father was already gone. He wept. He said he was sorry. I believe he was. But I did not let him move back in. Some things you forgive without pretending they never happened. I still live in the house I built. Coffee on the porch in the morning, the fence line at dusk, Ellen's roses, yellow every spring. Bradley comes on Sundays now. We drive down to the creek before the sun comes up, the way we used to. We fish, the two of us at the water 40 years ago, both of us laughing at a fish that got away. On the back, I wrote just one line. This was all you ever had to keep. They thought I was too old to fight back, too tired, too broken. They were wrong. I did not want revenge. I wanted the truth to stand up in the light. And it did. Some men you can push, and some men you should never, ever underestimate.